Good morning, good morning, good morning. How are you today? It is Pause with Elizabeth Eleanor, and we are going to talk about mending a broken heart. I've got to tell you, if you're human and you're a woman, I'm assuming men as well, but being a woman, I only know what it feels like. You've had a broken heart at one stage or another, right? I would love for you to put in the chat. I'm just checking to see that I'm on. I am. I would love for you to put in the chat where you're watching from and how you are today. Because this series is really about having that opportunity to stop, pause, and reflect. Because we are often constantly in this cycle of doing, going over and over and over again, and never taking the opportunity to reflect on where we've been, where we're at now, and where we want to be. And it's a really important skill set to for spiritual development, for emotional maturity, for the intellect and the identity to recognize that we are living a human experience. We're here doing all the things, and having that opportunity to stop. Because if we don't reflect on where we're at now, how can we know how to refine our behavior so that we can step into a higher version of ourselves? We are so distracted. Hey Ruth, lovely to have you on here. Lovely. I would love for you to share where you're watching from and how you're feeling today. Because this is a big topic, right? Having a broken heart is a really challenging and painful experience. I know that I've had a broken heart several times in my life. And the biggest one was really way back. It wasn't even a relationship like a partner that started it all off. It was way back when I was 15 and my dad died. And he was the bee's knees to me. My dad was sick on a kidney machine, and he couldn't work, so he was on a machine. He had a machine at home, so he was on a machine 3 times a week. I think it was 6 hours, if I remember correctly. And because of that, my mum was the money earner in the family, and she was never at home. So I was the youngest. I was 3 years old when he got sick. So I never really knew my mum because she was always working, and Dad was the house dad. So he was the one that was supporting, the family to cook, clean, and all the things. And we became partners in crime because he was always sick. So I ended up being one of the ones that was cleaning and cooking and looking after the family with him. And then he passed when I was 15 years old. And it broke my heart because in my belief system at the time, he was the only one that really loved me and validated my existence. And to have that whole experience, like it was a horrible time of my life, because who was I then? Who was I in that experience now? I felt alone, I felt betrayed, I felt insignificant, all the feelings, right? And I'd love for you to share have you had this experience yourself? Drop it in the chat. Have you had an experience where you've had your heart broken? And what are some of the feelings that you had through that process? Because these things can then end up locking into our system. And at 15 years old, you can imagine having someone that you think is the only one that loves you leave. it was a challenging time, because then I was like, well, who am I in the big scheme of things? What is my role on the planet? What does life mean? You know, like, why am I experiencing this? And I ended up having, numbing myself for 10 years basically, and now in retrospect I can see that I was grieving for 10 years. But I turned to the first guy that came along, which was a guy from school, and we were both very innocent. Neither of us had had a partner beforehand, and we just went on this journey of being completely wounded. Like, for 10 years we were wounded together. He became an alcoholic, and we were both on drugs, and just completely numbed ourselves to reality because we couldn't cope. And through that process, you get stuck in these patterns of behavior of really being in your identity and being the victim to your emotions and your beliefs, right? Because when something like this happens, one of the things that happens is you start believing less of yourself, less of who you are, less significant to anyone else, not perfect enough, not good enough to to really feel good about yourself. All of those things play out, and you feel broken. You just feel broken. And I want to address a couple of these experiences, because there's two things that I want to address: is the cycle of being broken and feeling like your heart's broken, and the identity piece, right? So let's talk about the identity. Actually, let's talk about the cycle first, because as a human being, we are here experiencing life as part of a cycle. Like, we're carbon-based beings, and so is the planet, right? The things that relate me and these plants are the same, because we're both carbon-based. We're both made up of minerals and all of the things that make us physically part of the earth, right? And so because of that, we have cycles in our life. Our cells replicate, and they go through a lifespan, and then they die, right? And then there's a replication again, and there's this cycle. And we, as women, we have this moon cycle, right? So we're governed by the tides and the moon, and we have opportunity for new life to be created in our womb. And if that doesn't happen, we shed blood, and we've got this monthly cycle, right? And we've got the seasons of the planet, right? There's a seasonal pattern that's happening on a regular basis on our planet. Now, sometimes it's a bit, mucked up a little bit or whatever, but it's still this seasonal experience that we're having over and over again. And the same with our emotions. So our emotions are, governed by our hormones as well. And so if you've had an experience where you felt this pain and suffering because somehow your heart's been broken, you've had the experience of being in a relationship, for example, love someone dearly, and just can't get your voice heard. There's no validation, there's no emotional communication. You're doing your best to be part of this relationship, or you're not, right? Maybe sometimes you're not even, doing the best that you can. And through that process, something happens that causes pain and suffering in some way. And it might be, emotional abuse or neglect. It can be, infidelity, either you or your partner decide to, see the next shiny object, and next thing you're in having an affair. All the things that can happen create this suffering within us. And through that process, there's a couple of things that can happen. One of them is you can just keep suffering. You may stay with that partner. You may stay with a broken heart and decide that for some reason you don't feel strong enough and self-validated enough to recognize that you deserve something better than this, and you make the decision to leave. You could actually, I know many women that stay in relationships even though they're suffering in it. They're suffering because of their own internal dialogue, but they're also suffering because that internal dialogue creates a particular vibration within you, right? A frequency. So spiritually, we have this frequency within us depending on our beliefs, emotions, our potential, our limitation, what we're focusing on. All of those things create the vibration within us. And so if we're got all of these self-inflicting or self-sabotaging beliefs holding us back, then we're holding that frequency, and then we're going to create that in our relationships, right? And so if we don't feel good enough but don't want to do anything about it, then we're going to be creating relationships where the other person is treating us in that belief that we're not good enough, right? They may be narcissistic, or is a toxic relationship in some way. And many women stay in that suffering, in that belief, in that infliction, right? In that brokenness. They stay in that brokenness. And I got to tell you, it's a really hard life to live, because I remember in those 10 years, I remember that's where I was staying. I was staying in that self-sabotage of I'm not good enough and not capable of living by myself without some sort of support. Even if the support was like salt in a wound, I was prepared to stay there because I didn't think I was capable of living by myself. And I didn't want to go back to my family, and so I stayed in the suffering instead. Throw in the chat. Come on, ladies, let's be a little bit transparent here. This is a big topic, right? Throw in the chat if you've had that experience where you know that it was the wrong thing to do, but for whatever reason you stayed in that situation because of the beliefs. It's the beliefs within us, right? I didn't feel strong enough, capable enough. I thought I was wrong. I'd been brought up to believe that I was wrong, that everything I thought was not right. So I had to look external to myself to be validated. And that was one of the reasons I stayed, right? Then you've got the broken heart, where there is the separation, right? Where now you're alone, now you're isolated, now you're here with just your pain. And in that process, that's a really it's I've got to tell you, it's a little bit of a step from being in the pain and continuously allowing it. It's a movement forward, but it's still painful. It's still, if you potentially have still got those beliefs and they're just smashing you in the face. They just keep, coming at you with more and more of not good enough, not worthy, all the things, right? It was my fault. I should have done this, or I could have done that. And then we go into blaming the other person and they shouldn't have done this and they didn't. All the excuses and all the stories that we conjure up to validate where we're at, right? So having a broken heart is a process, because when we first start through that process, and progressing through that process would be moving away from that pain, right? So that now you're isolated in the pain, that it's an internal pain, not just not internal and external. When you're in that place, that's a movement forward in some way. And things come up, right, where you're trying to validate the experience and understand it in some way. And so anger can be part of that process, right? There's this cycle to having a broken heart, and mending a broken heart, right? And so anger can be one of those next levels of healing. Now, as a spiritual woman, one of the things that I know, and it's not so much now, but it depends on what circles you're on, we have like a cultural spiritual belief that you're not allowed to be angry because then you're not being spiritual, right? Throw in the chat or give me a love heart if you've heard that one or felt it or experienced it in some way. Oh my gosh, I'm not spiritual if I allow myself to feel my feelings and I'm feeling pissed off at the moment, right? That's changing as spirituality consciousness has developed and become more aware of itself here on the planet, right? As I was saying, not so much in some groups. I still see it in some different levels of consciousness, but it's okay to be angry, right? It's part of the healing process. It's part of the experience to heal yourself from what was an experience that you were a co-creation in, right? So being angry and allowing that anger to come up, because when we suppress these feelings, they get blocked in our energy field. But then the more we suppress them, the more they get blocked, the more they become a physical blockage. And this is where dis-ease starts coming in. Because when you're blocking an emotion, you're blocking it from coming out of the very cells of your body. And so then the cells start becoming dis-ease, and in whatever way, like if you're blocking anger or sadness, they say that forms in the liver, right, or the kidneys. And so there's different metaphysical charts and structures these days that show that we can hold emotions in different parts of our body, right? So it's really important to feel our feelings and allow ourselves to express them and get them out, right? Get them out of our body, because when you're suppressing them, you're doing a disservice to yourself, your body, and to everybody else around you, because it still is there. You're feeling it, they feel it. People feel energy first, even if they say they don't or they don't recognize it. We are energetic beings first, and we interact through our energy system first, right? So if you're feeling this anger or sadness and you're not allowing yourself to express it, then you're then interacting with your environment in exactly the same way, and so you'll just bring more of the same into your reality until you can release that out of your system. Now, what happens in this section, in this part, is anger can be a process that if you've suppressed that, or sadness, if you've suppressed that at any other time in your life, then it becomes an accumulative experience, and you can get caught up in just being angry for a long time, right? Depending on how much anger you've got in your body or sadness, it can really, if you start allowing it, it can really start, opening up and becoming a bit of a volcano, and next thing you're, screaming like a banshee at everyone and all of the things, right? And that's what those wild women, their definition, a definition of wild women often is that they're, out of control in some way. There is a way to shift that. I teach this in, I've got a thing called the 3 breaths. I teach it in Awaken the Lioness, which is one of my programs. It's a 12-week online self-paced program. And so one of the things is the 3 breaths. So I'm going to teach you the first breath here. So when you're in a space where you're feeling anger or sadness or whatever emotion and you want to allow it to clear out of your body so that you can shift and move into the next frequency, one of the things to do is just breathe it out. And I do it this way. So I'm feeling an emotion, right? And I go. Now I actually make a noise with my mouth, because what I'm doing is I'm setting the intention to clear that emotion out of my body, right? I'm allowing the anger out of my breath. What that does is it actually takes, I would say, if I'm going to guesstimate, I would say, depending on the person, 50% of the emotion can come out of the breath, which means that you've got a little bit more regulation, self-regulation of the emotion that you're having. Anger, sadness, defeat, whatever it might be that you're experiencing. When you breathe it out, then you're interacting with that emotion and you're creating this co-creation with your emotion, right? So you're breathing it out. So that means that when you're having the emotion, you're still having it in your body, but you're clearing out some of the excess that may be stored from various other things. Now, when you get to a certain point with this, as a healer, one of the things that I do is, as I'm healing, we just had our group coaching call this morning in my Conscious Creator course, right? And while I'm working as a healer and I'm tuning into other people's frequencies, I feel different things in different chakras, in different parts of my body, and I am aware when it's not mine, and I'm able to breathe it out so that I'm releasing that excess and I'm not having it get caught in my body, which is one of the things that a lot of healers have an issue with, is holding excessive energy, or being an empath and holding on to the energy from somebody else. So you can use this as a little bit more advanced way of clearing energy. When you're aware that it's not yours, you can clear it out through that breath, right? So when you're doing this, you go through these cycles. So you might be angry to start with. You might then move into feeling sad. As you're going through these processes, you're identifying different parts of the process. You may start, the anger is, they've done this to me, right? The sadness might be, oh, look at me, look what happened to me, right? And so we have different beliefs that come up with the different emotions. And we want to see this as part of a rhythm and cycle. Grieving has all these different stages and is a natural part of being human. And so we as women who are always trying to be a people pleaser and good girl and, like now the strong woman, we don't allow ourselves to go through this natural rhythm. We've disconnected from the seasons of our life and our existence. To be able to drop into that and just go, oh, I'm grieving something at the moment, or this is how I'm feeling, and name that feeling. When you name it, it's like a vampire that you flood with light, right? It disappears, right? The shadow cannot be there when you put light on it. So when you define an emotion, what you're doing is you're able to identify it. And so 80% of it is the acknowledgement of it, right? The rest sort of just dissipates as you go along, and you're using that breath. And through that process, we then can move into the next step of, you know, allowing that out of our body so that our body can then rest and pause and start bringing in the reflections of, wait a minute, I'm not broken. I'm actually, this is just an experience I've had. So when we go through these cycles of grieving or processing something from our identity, we can get to the end of that cycle and recognize that actually our identity feels broken, but when we recognize ourselves as pure creative spirit, really connect into our higher self and really acknowledge our higher self, when we do that, we then have that ability to move into self-sovereignty, and that's where hope, trust, love, gratitude, you know, all of those things can start moving in, and we can shift our beliefs around who we are and recognize that this experience, you know, in reflection was the opportunity for us to change and to choose differently. Because if we're broken in some way, then it's an opportunity to see that we are more than that, and move into another aspect of that, into not another aspect of that, into another aspect of who we are, right? And so unfortunately, we've been conditioned to stay in the grief, to stay in the pain, to stay in the suffering, to make it our story, and then become permanently in that field. So one of the things that happened to me when I met Tim, you know, beautiful experience, and I keep telling everyone it was a fairy tale encounter, and it was like in the movies, because if you think about the fairy tales in the movies, it wasn't all just love and light and, oh my God, I met this prince on the beach and now I lived happily ever after. Every single part of these stories that we're all entertained by has those moments of, doubt and fear of the unknown and all of those things. And all that cycle happened in this really beautiful process. One of the things that happened for me was I said yes, and we started seeing each other and hanging out and all of the things. And I noticed a couple of times me saying the same thing. There was a couple of months in, and I was saying to him, he was eating things that I didn't believe, you know, like I didn't like, and I didn't believe he should be eating it, right? He can do whatever he wants, but I did notice that I had said a couple of times, you know, you really shouldn't eat that because those sort of things bloody kill you, and I don't want you dying on me. And it was the third time I said it that something like my breath, I caught my breath and was like this total shock in my body, because my identity recognized that what I was saying was the last person that loved me this deeply was my dad, and he died on me and left me and abandoned me. And so I had this moment of recognizing that I hadn't even completely opened my heart up to Tim, because I was concerned about being left behind again. So I was able to shift that because I identified it. I was, and I've got the tools to be able to clear that out of my system. And so doing that was when I was able to completely step into allowing complete and utter love and being in this beautiful divine relationship. So when you can move out of the cycle of the broken heart and see that it's just an experience that you've had, and it's an opportunity for growth, and it's an opportunity for reflection and to clear beliefs that no longer serve you, then you have the opportunity to experience something different. You have the opportunity to move out of that. And I'm feeling like there's people on here that are ready for that experience, right? You've moved out of the broken heart. You've moved, you've cleared it. You're in the catalyst. You're in that place of looking to clear the deeper levels of it. I want to share that in a week's time, I think it's about 7 days, we are starting Calling in the One, which is a 9-month program that we're running. Last time I ran it was for 3 months, but this time I wanted to do an extended version. So we're running it for 9 months, and it's going to be a really deep dive into clearing all of these vibrations that are holding you back from really expressing and experiencing true love and being able to be a vibrational, energetically aligned match for your divine partner. Because when you're in that vibration of self-love, respect, validation, all of those things, then you're attracting magnetically all of those experiences, including your partner that's waiting for you to step into that, right? So all the old experiences will no longer be relevant, and you will then step into that partnership that has all of the qualities that you desire. So if you're interested and want to find out more, it's still on the beta pricing. So I've still got it at a really low price because this is the first time I'm running it for 9 months. I know the stuff that we're doing. It's just that I'm using this as a test run to see. We've already had 3 women meet their divine partners. Now I want to triple that, tenfold that. And so I'm looking for results. So we have that at the absolutely low price of $555. So it's a no-brainer. You can even get a payment plan. It starts in a week. So if you're interested, put a love heart into the comments and we'll send you the link so that you can jump in. Take care. Catch you next Tuesday, and enjoy your life.